Hi, I'm Maribeth Quinn, and today I'm going to talk about using your sketchbook to create a safe zone where you can hone your craft. You can find these ideas and more like them in a freebie on my website, and I'll put the link in the description. But I felt this topic was relevant because I've realized that even in my sketchbook, I have a tendency to try to make something beautiful, but at the expense of learning something new. But before I talk about that, I'm going to show you my paint colors for my limited palette. And the brands don't really matter because, this is all just practice. And also some materials that I experimented with. So here they are, phthalo blue-green, the light magenta, and the Indian yellow, and of course, black and white. I also used a lot of golden glazing medium, the Artgraph Taylor's chalk, and tempera paint sticks. All of these are in the description. So here is my palette. I'm just loading my palette up, and I love working with a limited palette. You learn so much about color mixing and how many colors you can really make. So today, as you watch me paint, I'm going to talk about why this safe zone has been so important in my work. And in the second half of the video, I'm going to reflect on the specific things that I was able to learn about these materials and my process, because I had the freedom to not care about how anything looked. So I'm not going to try to make something beautiful. So then what are my objectives? Well, I'm interested in things like having a lot of variety in this acrylic base and the other materials that I'm using. I want a lot of dark areas, I want a lot of light areas, and a lot of variety in color, so that when I lay down tissue paper, I can see how they all interact. I also want to see how lighter or darker tissue paper interacts with color variations below, as well as how the transparent tissue interacts with similar or quite different color families below it. So there's a lot that I want to experiment with, including different textures that I've never used. These are my main goals, and they're much easier to achieve if I don't have some part of my brain always trying to make sure that I'm making something attractive. Of course, there's nothing wrong with making something beautiful, but it's about priorities, really. For instance, if I have no tolerance for making something that's not beautiful, then making something attractive is just going to be my top priority. It's the most important simply because I can't tolerate anything else. It's really, I guess, a self-protection mechanism, right? With this low tolerance, if I make something that looks bad, then all of my erroneous beliefs get triggered. Like, this is ugly, so that means I'm not a good artist. Or I don't have talent because a really talented artist can make everything beautiful. We all have these trigger thoughts, I think. And generally, we don't do well advocating for ourselves when they come up. So we have to protect ourselves, right? So for me, the way that I softly challenge them is to regularly make and inhabit this space that is safe from the expectation to make something attractive. And instead, it puts the priority on curiosity and learning. So if I'm going to have a thriving practice, then I need a safe zone where I can just gather information, experiment, and grow, and have the freedom to just observe and make marks and think. A place where there are no mistakes, because it's all about learning. So for an example of this, let's say if I'm a cook, then this space looks less like making an amazing meal and more like experimenting to see how different things in my pantry work together. So when it comes time to make a meal, I know better what I'm doing. Or if I were a dancer, it's like doing repetitions and isolated dance moves in front of a mirror as opposed to a performance. And we can see this in children. We can see the difference between play and taking a test in school. One is teaching them about life, and the other is executing knowledge. So having this place to learn, and I'm really tempted to say having a place to make mistakes, but I even want to go further than that and suggest that we need a place where mistakes don't exist. It's just pure cause and effect, and our creative observation of those details and outcomes. So just working with these different pieces, like this one here. This looks pretty opaque. It came in a shoebox. It was tissue paper that came in a shoebox. It doesn't look very translucent, and it looks predominantly white. But when I put it on this light background, look at that. It turns almost completely translucent, and it has all those dark flecks in it. So I like knowing that that's what that particular paper does when you put the adhesive on it and you put it on a surface where it can show through. So this paper I'm working with right here is some mulberry paper. And I'm just working with scraps to see what these odd shapes look like. Now this is just a napkin. It is a kitchen paper towel that I use to wipe my hands on and wipe the surface when I was making a bunch of tissue paper. And I got to thinking, what would that look like as a piece of collage? And so the sketchbook is a great place to try that. Now, one thing I'm realizing in this moment is, wow, this takes a lot of the golden liquid medium. Because it's so absorbent, it takes a lot to adhere it to the surface. So that's good information. Now, this is a store-bought piece of just art paper that my daughter didn't want anymore. And so I thought, well, I'll just put it in my collage box. I don't really like it. It's way too busy. But I thought, I'm going to work with it. I'm going to put it in a couple of places, one on the front side, one on the back side, onto this surface, and just see what happens when I put transparent tissue over it. Just information gathering. So here's a piece of tissue paper that, as it was drying, it got folded over and it stuck to itself. So I am going to see what it really looks like if I leave those folds intact. Now you saw that I had to make sure that where those folds were, that I actually got some medium inside there to keep the folds adhering to one another. So now I'm curious about what tissue paper looks like over this kitchen towel. This is some Asemic writing on a piece of tissue paper. It's very light. It's light pencil. But over this really light background, it actually shows up really nicely. Now, if I had put that on a dark background, I don't think you could see that nearly as well. But I only know that from experience and from doing things like this. So I have a lot to sort of look over and really see what I've learned. And I spend a lot of time looking at my sketchbook and just taking it in. Okay, so it dried overnight, and I wanted to just talk about and point out some of the things that I learned by not caring how this looks at all and just experimenting to gather information. Because once I learn that information, next time I go to paint something or to work with collage, I know what will work in certain situations or what won't, or what will give me the effect that I want. I'll have a better understanding of all that. So I'm going to zoom in on some of these things. this piece right here, I remember I did not like that piece very much, and I'll show you why. It was very very bold, had this really strong gold running through it, and I almost used the backside just because it would be subtle, but then I thought, nope, I want to see what I can do, how I can work with this. If I use this in some lower layers and then work over the top of it, I want to see what happens. So this is what happened with that. I used another piece of, I think, just some blue tissue. I believe it was like about this color over the top there. And I really kind of like that. I like letting just a little bit of it show through. I would probably use more tissue to just barely let any of the gold show through, but I like the effect that it has, the muted effect. So that would probably be something that I would like to use in the future. Let me turn on the light and see if this helps. Okay. Another thing that I liked is I put this piece of tissue paper that just had some Asimic writing on it. I put it in this light area because I knew the writing on it was in pencil. It was so light, you could hardly even see it on the tissue paper. But as you can see, when I put it over this white background and really light paint colors, it showed up in a very subtle way. I like that a lot. Another thing that I like is this dark area up here. I put on something dark underneath to begin with, probably like this. And then that's that piece right there, I think. And then I put a lighter color over the top. And I just like how all of that is working together. So that would be something that I would probably do again, as opposed to this right here. This light piece of pink, I don't think it was as light as this. It was probably more like this. I put that over this darker paint. And what happens when you use really light tissue over a darker area, if it's too light, it winds up doing this. And that is a lot of the fibers in the paper really start showing up in contrast instead of disappearing and allowing just the pigment to show through. Now, if I had put that light pink over an area like this or this, it would just wind up looking like this, probably. So that is another thing that I learned, is that I want to be careful. For me, now somebody may actually like the way that that looks. It does have a really cool look to it. It's just not what I was going for. So this might be something that someone would use to have a certain effect. But if I'm just wanting the pigment of the papers to show through, then this light paper over the dark area is not going to give me the effect that I'm looking for. And here was the other big experiment, was the paper towel that I used. Get up close there. That had a bunch of paint that I was just using it as a waste towel, really. And that wound up looking interesting, doesn't it? It's very textury. It's very thick. It worked well with the golden. Like I can't really get that to come off the paper. It's really adhered well. So the golden glazing medium works well there. And then I layered another piece of tissue paper over it. I kind of like the effect. So I may be trying that again just to see what happens. And there were several other things. Oh yeah, here was the piece of, remember the piece of tissue paper that got folded in on itself and stuck together in the drying process. I just left it like that and glued it in the state that it was in, and I really like that. I like how there's so much going on right there. It's really interesting to me. So, as you can see, working with your sketchbook in a way that it's not about trying to figure out how to paint something beautiful, but instead use the materials that you normally do and just see what happens. It's a very safe zone. It's a safe experimenting zone. And you also can refer back to it for color combinations. Like, I'm really loving this up here, and this makes me want to use these dark greens, which were made with this teal and this Indian yellow. I always put, if I just use a limited palette, I always just put little dots in the corner of my sketchbook so I can remember what colors combined to make the colors that wound up on the page. But I'm loving this dark green with these dark blues, which is the teal, probably with a little bit of pink actually. But I'm loving those together, so I'll probably use that again. But you can get lots of information. I frequently go back through my sketchbooks and just look for things. If I get stuck on a painting, like here's my landscape side. That's what's so great about these accordions. They just start over again when you turn them over. Start over again with blank pages. But this is my landscape side, and I frequently go through to look for color combinations that I like together. Like, I love that color combination right there. Or I'll look for different things that I discovered along the way that I want to add as elements to another painting. So these sketchbooks are truly our safe zone to just experiment and see what happens. And really, it's giving ourselves an understanding of our own process. You know, it's one thing to just sort of throw things on the canvas and really like how it turns out. It's just a fortunate event. But what I want to do is be able to reproduce that. I want to learn more about it. I want to learn why it happens, why it had that good effect, and what will happen then when I can be informed and take those combinations of things and put them together. This is how my work can actually move forward and get better and more refined. So if you like a lot of what you heard today, then you can pick up my free PDF called Normalize the Mess of Creative Journey. It's just all about the thoughts that we universally have that stop us on our creative path and how to get around them. You can find this on my website, and thank you so much for watching and commenting. I always love to respond to all the comments. Happy painting!